A cop worked a high crime area where there were many public housing projects. Dogfighting and animal cruelty were common. Dogfights were frequently held out in the open. The police response to dogfighting and other acts of animal cruelty was virtually non-existent. It was common for some children and teenagers in the projects to fan out to surrounding neighborhoods and to steal dogs from backyards and elsewhere and bring them back to the projects to fight. Some children and teenagers would throw losing dogs, if they had not been killed in dogfights, from the high-level floors of the buildings. Other dogs that were wounded in fights but that did not die were often left to die slow deaths from their wounds. Dogs were often left in vacant apartments and left to die by negligent children and teenagers that liked seeing the dogs fight but were not interested in providing food and water for the animals. There were children and teenagers that fought, beat, burned, cut, set on fire, tortured, threw out of windows cats and dogs without blinking an eye. The cop was determined to have these crimes of violence addressed. This was not only an animal welfare issue, but also a child welfare issue. There was no excuse for police to ignore these crimes and respond only if they personally felt like responding, not because they were required to do so. It seemed that if the prevalence of animal cruelty and dogfighting and the non-existent smoke and mirrors reaction to it were exposed, animal organizations and animal advocates would change and rally to get public law enforcement to respond appropriately. All it seemed at the time that was needed was raising awareness and advocacy. Pathetically, raising awareness often is nothing more than a new opportunity for unscrupulous people to exploit. Wolves can easily dress themselves in the coats of lambs. The advocacy needed never came. There are many reasons why police, not animal organizations, not token police forces, not humane investigators, should be the ones that respond to animal cruelty and dogfighting. This is talked about extensively in other videos and blogs. Why did a number of animal organizations and animal advocates aggressively present themselves as the answer to animal cruelty and dogfighting? Why did they want money for doing poorly and inappropriately, at best, what public law enforcement could and should have been doing for free? Because there is enormous money to be made off of the suffering of abused animals. Contributions and careers are made by pretending to care about or to be doing something about animal cruelty and dogfighting. The cop spent thousands of dollars of his own money documenting the cruelty and dogfighting to expose it without wanting or expecting any reimbursement, only to have it plagiarized by others that presented it as their own material to enrich themselves and further their careers. The director of one very well-funded animal organization embarked on a major campaign to have it appear that the organization and its humane investigators were the answer to animal cruelty and dogfighting. The cop told the director that all his humane investigators were doing by their often toothless investigations that did not lessen animal cruelty or dogfighting was frequently give dogfighters and animal abusers a heads-up moment to move their animals to a different location. Giving the appearance of doing something about animal cruelty and dogfighting, no matter how ineffective and harmful, became a source of new funding, money, and career advancement. People are emotional about animal cruelty when it comes to dogs and cats. Many animal organizations and animal advocates know that by playing on those emotions, money and careers will be made. The cop learned that when it comes to actual efficacy, no one cares. Accountability in the nonprofit world rarely includes scrutiny of the actual programs, works, and interventions of nonprofits and their efficacy. Organizations that claim to evaluate nonprofit organizations' worthiness often ignore efficacy. In fact, almost all the time, or always ignore efficacy, which is the single most important thing. Nonprofits get away with worthless, even harmful programs and interventions, and there is rarely anyone that will scrutinize or challenge what they do. Corruption does not always take an overt form. Providing ineffective, worthless, even harmful interventions and services is its own form of corruption. What nonprofits actually do and whether it is worthwhile and effective what they do must always be taken into consideration, especially when it comes to voiceless and silent populations. Actions that are ineffective and harmful are as bad or worse than doing nothing. When it comes to animal cruelty and dogfighting, the police response remains poor, with few exceptions. A number of animal organizations and animal advocates are all over animal cruelty and dogfighting, presenting themselves as the voice for the abused. They exploit cruelty and also enable police to continue to do little to nothing about it. Money pours into their pockets, no matter how ineffective and harmful are they. The population they claim to represent has no voice to argue otherwise. Dogfighters continue to this day to have greater chances of getting struck by lightning than ever getting arrested for dogfighting. Animal abusers are rarely arrested despite animal cruelty being a common occurring, widespread crime. There are people and organizations that exploit suffering, pain, and misery for their own gain while presenting themselves as saviors. There are many issues, problems, pains, and ills that can easily be exploited, not just animal cruelty and suffering. This includes, but is not limited to, poverty, child welfare and child exploitation, especially in developing countries, conservation, wildlife protection, environmentalism, plastic pollution, and much, much more. Nonprofits should exist to lessen pain, suffering, misery, and to resolve and lessen problems and ills. Instead, many nonprofits are parasites that feed off of pain, misery, and suffering in order to profit and gain. This is especially true when it comes to voiceless and vulnerable populations that are unable to reveal the truth about what exploitative organizations and people actually do.